All right. Well, good evening, villagers, and welcome to 12th of 2025's public safety meeting. Before I get moving forward here with the roll call and call to order, I would like to wish a happy birthday to my dad. Today is his birthday, and he's also been at his residence for 50 plus years, so he is a long resident of North Hudson. I just want to wish him a happy 77th birthday today. Roll call. Trustee Olson?
Here.
Trustee Porter?
Here.
And then Chair Keller is here. Number 3, comments from the floor, which it looks like they wanted to stay in and stay dry tonight. I don't blame everybody. Number 4, we have minutes approval from our last meeting of May 8th.
I move to approve the minutes from May 8th, 2025's public safety meeting.
I second it.
All right. Anything else? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Looks like we're on number 5 already, and that's police chief's report. Chief, what do you got for us today?
So basically just one item of new business, and I included the information with the letter from St. Croix County's emergency management manager, or communications manager, Terry Anderson. But the communications department is looking at trying to make some adjustments to go from VHF to 800 megahertz. And so they are making some proposals through the county board to move forward a project that would make that happen. The end date is showing us to go into effect in 2029, but needs to say with a lot of the infrastructure and needs to make changes and bids and all those types of things, you know, we're 4 years out from that, but they expect that by 2027 we'll need to be looking at ordering new radios and making sure that they meet the requirements. And so he had just sent the letter out as kind of a heads up, and then to give some bullet points there on some of the reasons for the change and what a transition to 800 megahertz will look like and assist with interoperability, enhanced coverage and audio clarity, increased capacity and reliability, and then improved security and monitoring. So just basically a 30,000 foot view right now, just to bring the committee's attention to it. No action needs to be made at this point. Our radios, if that were to go into place, would need to be updated because they're probably 10 years old now, and they were not, the functionality was not put in them when we purchased them for the 800 megahertz. So we would probably have to make some adjustments to that. So again, for budgeting purposes and whatnot, just a real quick splash to look at this as an option or something that we'll be talking about in the future, but want the committee to at least have it on their radar as we look towards probably 2027 and then after that. But I believe next week, I want to say next week, they bring this to the county board, the full county board, to have a discussion on whether or not it's going to be placed into, you know, kind of some planning procedures for the county board itself. So we'll kind of wait to see, and I'll give you updates as I get them.
How often are radios need to be updated in general?
It really depends. I mean, we had radios in the past that were 15 years old and they were still working fine. So as long as you keep the batteries and keep doing all the updates that come along with it, they last quite a while.
Yeah.
I mean, the wear and tear on them, especially for the portables that are on our vests and whatnot, can get a little bit, but it's usually the microphones that fail or the chargers or batteries. But the system itself is pretty robust. And then the ones in the squads really get very little, you know, wear and tear on them. So
Okay. Yeah.
Then as far as the data information that comes along with the chief's report, the incident breakdown is there from May and the first part of June. Really no major things to call out. We had a couple of assists to other agencies, again, not unique, but just sometimes those happen a little bit more when we get into the busier time frames. So that is that information.
Can I ask what the animal complaints were?
So this is just a tally. I honestly
Okay.
don't have like
I didn't know if we had
I would assume that they're animal. Oh, I shouldn't say it. I know 2 of them are animals at large
Oh, okay.
because
Then
it was the same owner that their dogs were out running around twice.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
good question, but no, I don't have. If you want that detail in the
Nope.
future, I can get it to you, but I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just have a feeling that ever since we had the whole new ordinance or an ordinance put into place for animals, I'm sure we would just.
Well, I can tell you that there's no chicken
Yeah.
or rooster out of those 3.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
That I know.
That's
'cause
yeah.
That was
that
the
would-
only question.
Yep.
We spent a lot of time
Yeah,
on that.
that would throw a
so,
red flag for
yeah.
me. And then the next item is the written verbal warning citations by officers. So that information is available for you. You'll notice between Sergeant Hecht and myself, we were doing training in April and May. So, why some of our numbers might be a little bit lower than average. And that is the end of the police chief's report.
Well, thank you. That moves us to the fire chief's report.
All right, good evening. Had a little uptick in calls in May, so the village is kind of getting back to where they are normally for this time of year. It was pretty uneventful up to that point. Nothing out of the ordinary. We did have one animal rescue in the village during May. We did rescued 11 ducklings out of a sewer grate. So we don't normally go out and do that stuff, but if the public's going to put themselves in danger or try to do it themselves, then we offer to do it. So we're up here for that. Nice. Only updates from the fire department are we did fill out a fire inspector position with an internal candidate. They'll start July 1, and we're going to be looking to hire between 3 and 5 this year. We're going to open application period probably the last week in June. So,
What kind of qualifications do you have to have for that position?
None.
Okay.
Yep, you get all your training through the department. So basically, you have to be 18 years old, clean background, clean driving record, and then we'll send you to school to get what you need to be a firefighter.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Good on your end?
That's it.
All right. Number 7, use of Hudson first responders for emergency response in the village, discussion only.
So I provided you with an issue statement just with some, my attempt at providing some of the background. I did invite Jay Penfield to come as a representative of the Hudson First Responders Group to answer, questions or to talk with the group. But basically just looking at that background that Hudson First Responders have responded in the village of North Hudson for years. I guess I couldn't really come up with how long it had been, to be quite honest. I know that, and Jay maybe can help me with this, they were part of the St. Croix EMS kind of group that kind of there was some of the people that were EMTs would also then be first responders when they weren't working on the ambulance crew. So it probably goes back well before I was even aware. They're certified through the state of Wisconsin as EMRs, as are the 2 of the officers with North Hudson PD. They previously had an association with the town of Hudson, which is in flux, and I can let Jay speak to that if that's something that he wants to talk about. But due to that transition and the fact that North Hudson, our officers don't work we don't have 24/7 coverage, looking to try to determine if the village of North Hudson wants to incorporate the Hudson First Responder Group to cover, also to go side by side with us to calls for medicals and other emergencies, or when we don't have a North Hudson officer on, to be able to utilize them to respond to medical. They're a volunteer group currently, and so, again, it might be that they're not available, so that medical might just include Lakeview EMS showing up because they're our contracted medical services provider. But then under that present information, and I have it here on a document, just to speak to it really quick, is we have a contract with Lakeview EMS, the village of North Hudson does. And let me see if I can get this there we go. And so this is the contract that discusses, the section of the contract that discusses first responders. And it says in that very first paragraph, Lakeview EMS will partner with and coordinate its activities and services with any and all first responder groups in the village at no cost. First responders include, but are not limited to, the Village of North Hudson Police Department. So it seems to me, and I'm not an attorney, but it seems to me that leaves the door open to have other people provide first responder services within the village if the village were to request them, and then how does that all look? And then those responders would have training and the medical coverage and all of those types of things underneath Lakeview EMS's medical director. So that information is there. I have not reached out to Lakeview EMS to get any clarification if this committee would like John Mueller to come in and discuss whether or not this would be an option to bring in other people or how that would look. Again, this is kind of the first kick at the cat for the committee, and so that's why it's discussion only, because I think there's going to be way more information that this committee is going to need to have in order to move forward on any decisions to recommend to the village board. And then on the last part of the issue statement, you'll see that I just have some considerations on what kind of things we might need to investigate, or you all might need to investigate, is, would first responders become employees of the village, and what would that cost? Would an agreement be developed to contract for services with Hudson First Responders as an LLC or independent contracting group like we do with Animal Control, Lakeview EMS, and what would that cost? Would there be an option to utilize the Hudson Fire Department to fill the role of first responders, and what would that cost? Would the contract with Lakeview EMS need to be amended, or does that language that I just read already kind of cover any additional first responders? And again, this is not an inclusive list, but then also is there a need to have additional first responders in the village? So I don't have answers to all of that, but I wanted the committee to at least have an idea of what kind of things might be floating out there for options.
Well, and these are all definitely questions I would have had for about everything as well. So this is great considerations that you put into place for it.
So we've had assistance from the first responders, and where were they from in the past?
Yeah, and maybe Jay can speak to that, but so the township had previously had first responders that were responding into the town of Hudson as well as the village of North Hudson, and could have responded into the city of Hudson, but I think there was an agreement that they wouldn't. And so we had EMRs that were licensed through the state that were coming into town or coming into the village and showing up in medicals and assisting with things. And then there kind of became some question as to, well, who really is the oversight for if there is a complaint against a first responder with that group? You know, who do we reach out to? How do we deal if there are complaints or if we have issues? And then some questions started getting asked, and I think it really kind of came down to, well, it's the town of Hudson first responders that were also covering the village of North Hudson, and then it ended up being kind of convoluted into, you know, who covered what for costs. And I don't know if Jay, if you want to speak more to that.
I sure can.
Please.
Yeah, please. I'd appreciate it.
And if I said anything incorrectly, please let them know.
No, Mark has a real good history of what we've been doing here. So the first responder organization was started back with St. Croix EMS, and again, I don't know the official start date, but it's been quite a while. When St. Croix EMS disbanded and Lakeview took over, Lakeview was going to continue in that capacity, the same capacity as St. Croix EMS. I think it got a little convoluted in the fact that the town thought, since St. Croix EMS just basically kind of ran the program and there really wasn't a whole lot that the town had to do, the town, I think, didn't really realize that they actually had ownership of it. When Lakeview took over, Lakeview thought perhaps they had ownership of it. Their legal people decided they didn't want them to have ownership of a first responder agency. When all that kind of came to discussion, we clarified the entire situation of the town owns the first responders. Lakeview was simply providing medical direction. Lakeview put their medical direction on hold when they were trying to sort this whole thing out, and they still have not given medical direction back to the first responder agency. We have secured medical direction through a different doctor or different agency. So as far as the state of Wisconsin EMS agency, the first responders are a legal first responder entity through the state. All of the individuals within that system, and I'm the director currently, but all the individuals that are licensed through our system are licensed through the state. All of their, licensing is kept up to date through the state. The state does all the background checks and everything else, as they do for any, medical personnel. We are, our legal response area is Town of Hudson, Village of North Hudson, and City of Hudson. We currently don't respond in the City of Hudson. Well, we currently don't respond anywhere until we kind of sort out what the town wants to do. But that is our area of operation, is village, town, city. We have been operating with virtually no funding. Well, actually zero funding for at least the last 5 years since Lakeview took over. All of our people have bought their own equipment, bought their own radios, got their own training and paid for their own continuing education. So currently there is not necessarily a funding need to add people in to augment this. There may need to be some funding in the future. I think we've been very fortunate that people have had the dedication that they've had to provide their own equipment to do this. The town actually gave any funding they had to Lakeview, who was supposed to fund the first responders, but they didn't have money to fund the first responders, so we've been in kind of a weird limbo with them for the last couple of years. But this is our current staffing. We'd like to, and we have the ability to add more people in, just as a function of, providing the equipment. We did, and the whole thing with the town, I can't quite explain what the thought process with the town board. The new chairman, Rob Fowler, is certainly pushing hard to keep the first responder organization because it's already in existence, already licensed. All of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But the board has some concern with offending Lakeview, I think, is basically the way it comes down to, which, may be a concern here, although you have a contract with them, so your agreement with them is pretty clear. Our agreement with them is pretty clear, although they're currently not honoring it. So, again, that's another issue that the town is going to be looking into as to, why they're not providing the items in the contract that it states that they're going to. But currently, with this group that we have, everybody lives within the service area. 3 out of the 4 actually work within the service area. A little history about me. I started on St. Croix EMS in 1992. I was on that department until it disbanded, and I can't remember the year that was. That's probably 5 years ago now. So I was active with them until then. I was on the fire department for 18 years, just retired from there a couple years ago, right before, a month or two before Drew actually took over. So I've spent a lot of time in emergency services here in the area. I spent day one of my existence in Stillwater. So I was born in Stillwater, and then I lived in North Hudson until I was probably 25 or 28. Now I live in the town of Hudson. So fairly familiar with what you guys have going on up here and what we've got going on. As I said, we currently have medical direction through Dr. Ace, which is Amory Hospital, and we follow their medical guidelines and operate under her license. So the oversight for the medical component is by the doctor, right? They're the medical direction. The other oversight comes from the Wisconsin EMS agency, and we have a regional representative who we work with to make sure that we've got everything they need, and we currently are 100% with those guys. I did reach out to our regional representative to see what a transition to the village might look like versus the town. He had to do some research on that, but he didn't think it was overly complicated, and I don't know the real basics of that. When Mark kind of started this discussion with me about it is, would we move the ownership to the village and just respond in the village, or I don't know how that would all operate. Lots of questions to be asked as we move forward with this. If you want to move forward with this, it's basically a free organization. I mean, we're not asking for any money at this point. We actually got grant funding from the state, which was just under $14,000 for the first responders. The town has that funding. I don't know if that could be transferred, which that would be a huge benefit. That funding, from what I understand from the state, is going to be available going forward with no end in sight and potentially larger amounts of money. So the funding piece of this may not necessarily need to come from the village. we may just have to file for funding underneath the village going forward, and as we do that, we could then we could add in equipment and personnel and things like that.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
So you guys respond to the medical calls within the area, the village, the town, and there's no kickback to the town for fees, or does it go to the person calling? It's just totally free?
There's no fees
Volunteer.
at all. Yeah.
Well, for you guys, that's awesome.
It's all volunteer. We don't get paid to go on calls. We don't charge to go on calls, so there's no charges to the individuals calling for our service.
Great.
And then we're not currently compensated for any response, so.
Wow. Second question, thank you. So you guys operate under the license of Carrie Ace, the doctor out of Amory, but where does the insurance come to? Would it be under the village? Is it under, right now, the town of Hudson? I'm assuming there's a big insurance ticket, or, held somewhere in case something went wrong.
Yeah, so the insurance is, and I'm not exactly sure what we want to call it. It's really, I know that the town chair, Rob Fowler, talked to the insurance company that the town has to find out if this type of operation is covered with their insurance. And he found out that their existing insurance does cover this.
Okay.
That includes malpractice. We're in a real weird gray area of the potential to be considered, what's the language I'm looking for?
Free agents?
Yeah, Good Samaritan.
Okay.
Good Samaritan law,
Okay.
right? Which protects people
Yep.
providing medical care as long as they're providing care within this scope. They're not going outside of what their training is and their licensure is. So we have the ability to fall under that as well, which is something that covers people to provide that first responder type care. So
Right.
the town or the village insurance would maybe have to get involved if something went beyond that. There has never been an issue.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how that would work or how that would look.
So you guys have a contract currently, or there's no contract?
Well, there's no contract because we're technically owned by the town. So there wouldn't need to be a contract with the town because the town owns the agency and oversees the agency. So that was kind of a question at the town as well, and they talked about, do we need to make employees, and I don't quite understand how that would need to work, and I don't really, I'm not terribly well versed in how village or town boards operate as far as how that relationship would work. Like I said, the town technically owns the first responders, therefore we answer to the town. So I don't know that there would need to be any contractual relationship between us and the town. And and I know for a fact from the state of Wisconsin EMS agency, we don't need to have a contract with an ambulance service either.
Okay.
And they actually recommend that we do not contract with an ambulance because he said the way they described it is the state oversees our operations. We don't need a second agency overseeing our operations. So we do not have to contract or affiliate with an ambulance service. We just have to operate within the scope of practice, which is actually the name of the document that we have filed with the state that lays out what our operation is and what our abilities are or restrictions are.
Right. So,
And what that might include is whether or not they could administer Narcan. Or
Right,
whether or not
right,
they could
absolutely.
administer. So it kind of specifically lays all those
Yep.
pieces out.
Right. And an interesting example, and the state actually mentioned this to me, is if we affiliate with an ambulance service, they have the ability to control how we operate and what type of medical care we can provide. And with Lakeview, they didn't want us providing Narcan, they didn't want us providing epinephrine, which would be for anaphylactic reactions. They didn't want us doing that, and that was because they didn't want to provide the medications to us and have the cost of the medications. If we don't affiliate with an ambulance service, then we have the ability to operate to the highest level that we're licensed to, as long as that is within the scope and also allowable by our medical direction, which is another reason that I was very excited to have medical direction with Dr. Ace out of Amory, is they were very open and allowing us to provide some of those medications to our level of service. And some of the thought on that is law enforcement has Narcan, law enforcement has Epi. They didn't think that it needed to be a first responder intervention. However, there's certainly times when those folks aren't going to be there quickly enough. And so
Does
they're-
Spire carry though? Do you guys carry?
We do not carry it because if you carry that medication, it's considered an advanced level of care. You have to fill out patient care reports.
Got you.
So there's once you carry what the state considers a advanced level of skill, you have every run you go on, you have to fill out a patient care.
Oh, got you.
So we chose not to
I
carry the
understand.
equipment because our people didn't want that to be reported every time they went on a call.
What if one of your fire responders had that care certificate? Would they be allowed to do that if they
No,
get it?
because our scope of practice does not include the
Okay.
advanced medications.
Okay. So even if it was somebody that was
Yep.
tied
Because
to it.
they would be operating outside, what Jay had mentioned, outside their scope of
Gotcha.
practice. Yeah, it's something we explored.
Yep.
Looking into. Same thing with the organization. We're a state licensed first responder agency. We have 25, maybe 30 now. We just sent 5 more guys to first responder. So we have the same capabilities. We already respond with Lakeview into the village on cardiac arrest and at their request. We're already working with them.
So the real need here, we have big gaps, right, of times, not big gaps, we have times where there's not quite a faster response. Is that accurate?
To your point, yeah, I don't know if it's big gaps, but there are gaps.
Yeah,
You know,
that's-
we don't have
I-
24/7, especially now we're down, we're short-staffed, and so that is a bigger gap than when we're fully staffed.
And that can happen anytime. I mean,
Right.
just someone's on medical or something like that.
We
So
don't get to
the
schedule those.
fire, you guys would assist, we'd wait for ambulance, and we had someone come in and tell us all the response times to that, and I can't remember what they were.
Yeah, that was
but-
John Miller. He's the
Yep.
Lakeview EMS
Yeah,
director.
okay.
Now, when you guys are active, do you guys kind of have like a schedule of, like, say it's late night? Is there at least one of the first responders that's
We
awake to
currently.
help out, or?
We currently don't have a schedule to provide coverage 24/7. It's more, just whenever
Volunteer.
people are around. I was going to say it's similar to, the police department, but they do have a schedule, obviously, so they kind of know when people are around or not around.
I would think it's similar to like volunteer fire.
Yeah,
So,
it's
smaller
volunteer. The
towns, yeah.
pager goes off, and if anybody's available, they'll respond. And like I said, our goal would be to have, 10 or 12 people on the roster and available, but that takes a little more funding to be able to provide the equipment. We kind of figured with the town, it was going to cost about $5,000 a person to get that equipment, and that's an initial cost. So that's a radio, AED, right, and then a bag with the medical equipment. Lakeview has always provided equipment used on scene back to the first responders, which they've indicated they would continue that practice. So to add people on is just a rough guess about $5,000 a person. And that's a one-time expense, obviously with a little bit of radio upkeep or AED upkeep as time goes on, but it's pretty minimal at that point. So the number of people that we could have on the first responder organization is not necessarily limited, other than what the funding for that would be.
Which is something that you can find grants for as well.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yep.
I think that's a lot of information.
It is.
I mean, very above us for like attorneys, cities, everything else. So right now it's just, we're just discussing, is this something that we would like to pursue or check into options? I mean,
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things because it went away kind of out of the control of the village.
Right.
And so if that's something that the village would want to,
Take on.
reintroduce or look at other options. The one thing I didn't put on here, because I don't know, I've never even reached out, but St. Joe has a very robust first responder group. But again, I don't know if they have anything in their interest to head this way, or if the two merged. There's all kinds of different things that are outside of my scope, but just to, at least initially give the information to the committee, the Public Safety Committee on is, how much work do you want us to do to try to get some information on this? Or, because it is out of the control of the village currently, how much work do you all want to do to bring that back to our citizens? And I can be honest with you, I don't have all of the examples, I don't have all the data, because I don't think Jay really has. Do you have numbers on how many times your people have responded in the village?
I don't
over the
have
last several
that.
years?
Yeah, I don't have that
But
handy.
I know Jay was here one day when I was coming into work late, and his truck was sitting in the village, and he was on an ambulance on the way to St. Paul doing CPR, and that person survived.
Right.
So
Yep.
without Jay being there and the first responders being there, there's a good chance that could have had a different outcome. So there's a lot of those types of stories.
For
but
sure.
it is one of those things where it's a benefit. It's just a matter of, is there a cost, and how does that all work together?
I definitely think as a citizen here, right, we have gaps. There's ambulances are busy. You have to wait for one to get cleared. And if there's not an option like this, sometimes, people do die from this. So I would think our community would want us to check into it further myself. There's no hurt checking. See what we can come up with and work with the attorney and that kind of stuff. I, for one, think it would be a great idea.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I have, just to back up some.
Yeah.
So if somebody calls an ambulance here tonight, my understanding was we'll go to Lakeview, right? Because they're under contract with us. Is there some body that if they're tied up, they call you, or how does that, or
the way-
St. Joseph, the
way
town?
the way it currently would work is, Lakeview is your contracted ambulance service. If they didn't have a truck available, and they operate in part of when we transitioned from St. Croix EMS, which was based in Hudson, right, and two ambulances based in Hudson, with Lakeview, they run two ambulances in Stillwater, two are in Hudson, one is in North St. Paul, I think.
Yeah, but their window is really big.
Yes.
It's huge where
So
they
as they get calls for different areas, they move their trucks around to cover for those other areas. So there are times when they use this, they call it dynamic deployment, where they move those around. So there may be times when trucks are coming to North Hudson from Stillwater or from North St. Paul.
Yeah, they said
or
North St.
from
Paul.
the cities or whatever. If they were out of position, they have the ability to have a different ambulance service notified to come. In this case, it could be Lower St. Croix Valley, it could be River Falls. So Lakeview would make that decision and make that call. The first responder agency gets notified when Lakeview gets notified to the existence of a call. And then our people come directly from wherever they happen to be, whether it's at home or downtown having coffee or at their workplace. They would come directly to the scene with their own vehicle and their own equipment and provide care until relieved by an ambulance. And then in some cases, as Mark alluded to, we would continue to help the ambulance, whether we're driving for them or we're in the back of the truck helping them provide care as needed, so.
Yeah, when they were speaking, excuse me, my voice is not here tonight. They're a huge window, and they could be anywhere. It could be the ambulance coming that's from North St. Paul, but is in Minneapolis. They have to drive out. It could potentially be a very long time before someone gets to
We
somebody.
have an agreement with Lakeview. If there's an extended response time, they request us to respond. And we've done that several times.
And you guys can do this much care?
Same with them.
Oh, okay.
EMR level care.
Okay.
And that's with our the two officers that are EMR level certified. Otherwise, the other two officers are still first aid, so basically CPR, AED, and then can assist as needed at scenes. And to John's point, when EMS gets paged out, they all dispatch then lets us know of the medical. A lot of law enforcement agencies in St. Croix County will not respond to medicals, and we've made the agreement or the promise to the village that if we're available, we'll respond to all medicals. And in my perspective, from the chief's perspective, is when people hear a siren coming and when people see somebody walk in the door, it helps to slow that kind of tension, and they know somebody's there to help. So even if we can only hold a hand and give some benefit or provide a little bit of oxygen or hold pressure, it helps with just getting them to calm down enough that hopefully we can wait for, because you're right, there's been times where we've gone to medicals where they're saying the ambulance is responding from Bayport. Well, even lights and siren, that's a good 7 to 10 minute window that we're just being helpful to the patient as much as we can. So.
Now, did you say that we're still kind of waiting on things from the town as well with the situation, or is it one of them where we just start digging into what we'd want to do?
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a question that the town and Gina can talk about, because I watched, or I saw some minutes about a special meeting that they had that, it sounded like they weren't going to continue to move forward with this group, but then there was some information that they might reconsider. There's I think a lot going on in the town right now.
Oh, yeah.
So that's not an idea. And so really it was just does the village want to do this regardless of anybody else's politics or situation and bring on a group? And so that was one of the options is, what would that look like? Would they just have to say, we are going to have an agreement with the Hudson first responders that based on their medical direction and their status as volunteers and certified EMRs in the state of Wisconsin, that we're going to we invite them to come in. Really what would need to happen at that point, or one of the things that we need to happen, is that they would be included then for any page out of, under a medical emergency or an emergency. Right now, the St. Croix County Emergency Communication Center has suspended that, just waiting to kind of figure out where it's going. And that was a conversation that I know Jay had with the emergency, with Terry from Emergency Communications, and I had, is, if we're paging somebody that doesn't necessarily, we don't know exactly what their role is in the village, and they show up and something happens, is that a liability? And so until we kind of get clarification, that's been suspended at this time, although they were not responding, even though there was a page, because they were still waiting to hear. So yeah, there's maybe more questions than there are answers, but it might be cleaner than it actually, we might think it might be. So just looking for the committee to say, hey, let's start doing more digging, where if all of you said, you know what, we're good with where we're at right now with no first responders, then I'm not going to put the time and effort in.
So do we have to put a motion forth for this, or just?
You can't, because the agenda doesn't say anything about that, but I mean, if I'm getting the inkling from the committee, then we'll start to gather data.
I say we should continue to dig more into it. I mean, obviously we've had a great working relationship with the first responders for a long time, and I mean, as a village resident, long life village resident, I mean, we know that we appreciate any extra help that can save 2 to 3 minutes on somebody. I mean, know how it could be. It feels like a lifetime when you're sitting there waiting. And when you're saying 7 minutes, it's going to be like 14 minutes. But if you have a first responder come before that, it helps out a lot for our villagers. So I definitely feel that we should dig more into this and make sure that we can get the first responders back in action for the village.
I think it's going to take a lot. Right now, it sounds like there's a lot in limbo, lots of questions and that kind of stuff. But I think if someone's pursuing it, I don't know if anybody else is pursuing it, but if we're asking the questions, maybe it could speed things up and get you guys activated and working again.
Yep.
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't hurt.
Right.
There was even discussion at the town where they said, well, the village doesn't want you responding in the village anymore, which I talked to Mark about that, and Mark goes, well, that's news to us. We certainly want you to respond in the village. And we talked with Gina, right, the clerk, who'd kind of iterated the same thing. And, I guess that would be more of a board decision than anything. But from what I gather, that's certainly something that you're interested in. But that could help push things forward, too. I mean, it literally is, if the town wanted to move forward, it could be done very quickly. If we wanted to move over towards the village and kind of sidestep the town, I don't think that's very complicated either.
Yeah, I envision some lawyers and some more meetings and motions, and
Yeah,
it'll
for
take a
sure.
minute, but even if it was quick for their side, it'll still take a little bit. But I think pursuing something would be really great. And I didn't realize that fire does come with the same care. In my head, it was the Narcan thing, and so, but yeah, that's great.
Well, I will work with the village administrator and the village attorney and, Jay and the other partners at Lakeview EMS, and just kind of, we'll start to look at what this would look like and bring that back to the committee next month.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, that'd be great.
what I can gather for next month.
Whenever we can, yeah.
Yeah, if you guys are wanting to do it and you're available, that also talks about a person in the community as well, too. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Jay. Anything else in regards to the first responder one?
Nope.
Then we'll move on to 8. So we're looking at pedestrian safety and traffic concerns of the 100 block of 7th Street North and intersections with Riverside Drive North. Review Public Works Committee recommendations, discussion, and possible action.
I guess just before any motions may come forward, I provided again the information that at least 2 of the committee members had seen because they had sat through those meetings. Chair Keller, you're new to this topic, at least from the public safety perspective. I know that there was some conversation from the Public Works Committee that came forward. And so just looking at that intersection and talking about, there were no crashes all the way back to 2001, intersection related, which includes any pedestrians or any injury accidents, those types of things. And then just kind of who would be the person that would make some determinations on signage. That second section under section 90-9, official traffic signs and signals, that the street commissioner, which is the public works director, would be the one without any guidance from any committees or wouldn't have to go back to any boards, could put up signage to assist with safety and whatnot. I provided to the committee at the meeting tonight, but not electronically, the image or the picture that Gina had sent to me related to something that she and the public works director or the street commissioner had talked about, is to look at, and I believe she's actually going to order regardless, 2 signs that say slow road curves ahead and caution to be able to be placed on 7th Street North and Riverside Drive North, just so that there's some attention brought to the fact that the road changes. Obviously, that's going to be more for those people that aren't familiar with the area or aren't residents. Just because there was some information from the complainant or the resident that people are driving too fast around that corner. The recommendations that I recall from the Public Works Committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, because 3 of you sit on that committee, was to put up some signage regarding the curve. So I think this addresses that question from Public Works. And again, doesn't have to be moved by the committee. That's something Gina and Matt can order and put up. There was some information about changing the speed limit or slowing the speed limit. I do have information in here that I provided previously that in order to change the speed limit, there's some state requirements that come with it to be able to change it from 25, and it's only a 5-mile-an-hour change. So in my opinion, is 5 miles an hour going to change behavior? Absolutely not. I have a hard time getting people to go 25, so to get them to go 20 is going to be even harder per se. And then the third recommendation was speed bumps. I understand that the Public Works Director was not at that meeting, where he would have told you that speed bumps are not a good idea in the state of Wisconsin because you will wreck all of their plows and probably damage the street in the meantime. So, and really the complainant, when she brought forward the complaint, was talking more about icy conditions in the winter. So again, a speed bump is not going to help
do
with
anything.
that.
Yeah.
So I don't know that, other than the signage, I don't know that the other recommendations really from a public safety perspective are good fits. But I think we got feedback from the complainant to the resident that she's seen changes. Nothing's actually been quote unquote done, other than maybe the attention coming to the committee and maybe some of the community talking about it. But I think the addition of these signs by Public Works, the Public Works Director, will bring additional attention to it. And so I don't know that there is anything more, unless the committee has questions for me. I don't know that there's anything more that the committee needs to quote unquote act on.
No.
in
There
this matter.
hasn't been accidents since 2001 there?
There hasn't.
And it was just the complaint that people are driving too fast? Yeah, I
And
think
I
these
think there was some
signs,
sidewalk considerations, but that would not be in
That's not gonna work.
yeah,
public safety, that would be
Right.
public works.
yeah,
And
we talked about that, that's,
the narrowness and the fact that there's no curbs along that stretch of roadway on Riverside Drive North, I don't know.
it would
what
be
the
in
cost would-
residence lawns.
Yes.
I would say
So,
just. we
I
should
think
order
these signs are great.
Okay.
And this, yeah, we're not, 5 miles an hour, change it, go to the state, try to get, no, I think that's, we're addressing it. I think the sign is a good start.
I think if anything, if people are coming on that road, if they didn't know the area, they're gonna be turning on Wisconsin, coming off of Wisconsin, and turning down that way. So if they're picking up speed from 0 to 25 to hit that curve, I mean, they're gunning it. So, I mean, even bringing it down to 20 is not gonna make a big difference.
Yeah, and we've done some, we placed the portable speed sign on Riverside Drive North, which is, I think, what she was talking about, where there was some things being done. We can also place it in the 100 block of 7th Street North as people are heading southbound on 7th, just again, to bring attention. It's just, that's not something we have there on a consistent basis. It's an option, but of course, it's an expensive option, about $3,500 to get a permanent one there. So, we'll start with this and see if we
This
can
looks
make some
great.
change, so,
Yep.
Looks great.
all right.
And since it's going through that way off of what you said, we don't have to do an action on that then.
Correct.
All right. Let's move to number 9, safety concerns of crosswalk at State Highway 35 and Cratley Lane North. Discussion and possible action on this one.
So again, I guess for history, I did not put together an issue statement just because I think there's a lot of moving pieces in this particular one, a lot of which were outside of the control of the village. This was a State Highway 35, this was a Wisconsin DOT and county project to put in the bike lane. I know that my recollection of any input from the village was a public meeting that occurred here the year before. So if that was put in 2024, it was 2023, there was a public hearing. Originally, it was designed to continue southbound in front of the Village Inn and to go all the way to Summer Street as part of the path. I think there was objections or some feedback that they got from property owners or business owners in that one block area. And so the state and the county decided to terminate the path at North End Road North, and then the idea was that they would utilize North End Road to 4th Street back to Wisconsin to get back to the south end of the village, and that would be kind of the path. So that was my knowledge of any of the input that was brought forward. After the project was done, we started to get complaints from residents, both about the ability to cross at the crosswalk, which had been a previous complaint of the previous crosswalk, which was more in line with the intersection. Now the crosswalk is I don't know how many feet, but a little bit further north. And our anticipation, because I had reached out to the state and said, we get a lot of complaints, people are having a hard time crossing at this crosswalk, and their response was, if you don't mind waiting a year, because this was in 2023, if you don't mind waiting a year, we're going to do some readjustments to that intersection with this new project that we have coming through. So it didn't really resolve a whole lot, other than it now meets the requirements of the state for a crosswalk where there are sidewalk cutouts on both sides, where previously there was no sidewalk cutout on either side because there wasn't a sidewalk there. And so our crosswalk was technically not in compliance with a state regulations for a state crosswalk, which is why they wouldn't put up crosswalk signs and those types of things in advance of that particular crossing. So now we have it. We have a crosswalk, and you'll notice, and I brought to the attention of the village administrator when I was getting several of the complaints on why don't we have the same flashing lights like they have up by the
On Old Highway
YMCA and then up on Highway 35, where as a person approaches a crosswalk, they hit a button, it then activates, for a period of time, or I guess even St. Croix Street and 2nd Street now, where there's identifiers that, brings their attention that there's something going on there. And in reaching out, it sounded like the state said, well, because that crossing is in a 55 mile an hour zone and it's shortly after a curve as you come southbound, there was more of a need for, attention.
Right.
And they didn't make that decision other than just a sign at the crosswalk at Cratley or Station Lane. So Gina had done her due diligence and reached out and tried to see if the county would would add, or if they had funding left, or they put those signs up. There was kind of some pushback to say, well, it's now in the village, the project's there, but then there was options of having, if you've ever been in the county, let's say County Road E and I, where there's that intersection where the stop signs have kind of the twirly, two sides orange, one side white, bringing attention to it, signage. That was an option, but then it sounded like it still was not going to be, in my opinion, I don't think that's going to fix the problem, just because I've seen those signage. And then there was some cost done to install two signs with the electrical installation. The dollar amount was in the neighborhood of $14,000. I think it was $14,400. Actually, I have the email. And so, is that going to be a possibility? In talking with the village administrator, there is currently, 14,400. There is currently, the option that agencies or committees can come forward and look at the undesignated funds to, if there is a project that they feel that they want to move forward with that. And then this morning, yesterday, Gina sent me again, everybody's kind of trying to throw out ideas, that there's the LED solar trail crossing sign. This would flash 24 hours a day, not just when there was someone at the intersection. In my opinion, based on the volume of traffic and the limited amount of people that cross there, this might become another one of those sign blindness where it's just there.
Yeah.
And so I know that it's probably 10 times the amount to get the button pushing one, but I think that's going to bring attention to when there is someone at the intersection.
I agree.
So just my recommendation, but I think the question then becomes, and I think that's been the question that Gina has been working with the county. His name was Jason. I cannot remember his last name off the top of my head, but she's been working with the person that's associated with the project. Unfortunately, he came into the project after the project had already been approved and started, so he didn't have any feedback on the initial planning. That my recommendation would be to actually have the physical, if there's a person there, then it flashes, and I think that's going to be much more beneficial than if it's always flashing, and again, people just ignore the signage, because ironically, I found in people that I've talked to, the path gets used
A lot.
way more frequently than I thought it was going to. I don't know how many of those people actually cross, because I think a lot of them end up turning and going up Cratley, or at least some that I've seen when I've sat out there and kind of monitored things. But for my officers to sit out there and monitor if people are not stopping for the crosswalk, I could sit out there days in a row and never see anyone at different times of day. So it's hard for us to pick and choose when to monitor and enforce that. I mean, if we see somebody that violates that, obviously, we get a lot of traffic complaints where people say, I was stopped waiting to make a left-hand turn onto Station Lane, and someone passed me on the right-hand side when there was someone in the crosswalk, or I was stopped for someone in the crosswalk and somebody tried to pass me. That's obviously, we're working after the fact, which we have no problem doing, and we actually did educate a driver on a recent traffic complaint that way. But and I guess my last point, before I stop talking, is there was also a reference to some signage, I believe, that went through the Public Works, either Public Works Director or the Public Works Committee, on doing a bike lane signage, and that came back from the state that basically the village couldn't do that without getting a permit through the state, and the county couldn't do it without getting a permit. And I didn't get too deep into what that meant, because it sounded like it was probably more prohibitive than it was going to be an easy adjustment. So
I still understand why, like, during this whole project was going on. I mean, like you said, we didn't really have much say of it, but at the end of that trail, they put in the flashing crosswalk sign there. But why did they not add it for the one on Cratley? And then now we're going to be on the hook for probably $2,800. Because don't we?
no, the 14,000.
No.
I mean, is it 14,000 for both?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for $14,000 for it, when it should have been put in when they were doing the whole project.
And I don't have an answer for you on that. It changes to 35 mile. Well, as you're coming south, the 35 mile an hour change is right before that crosswalk,
Yep.
and the 45 mile an hour change is after the crosswalk as you go northbound. So technically, it's in a 35 mile an hour zone. So I don't know if the state basically said, and again, I don't know this, but a lot of times it's dependent on what the speed limit is at those locations. But when I talked to the state representative for DOT, when I called to say, hey, is this something that could be done? He said, I mean, you have to submit a permit for it. It's an easy process. If the village wants to do that, absolutely. You know, he didn't see that there would be any objection from the state to put them there. I just think that maybe nobody, at the time that they were putting the process together, nobody really understood, because there wasn't local feedback on how much of an issue we have at that intersection.
Well, if we do have the funds available for it, as like our administrator said, I do feel that we should probably push this to finance and to the board and get this taken care of right away, because I have spoken to a few residents that have had issues there, and that is a heavily walked and busy area, and it definitely needs to be addressed sooner than later. And I don't want to drag on anything else on that, so that's just kind of my opinion on that one.
I feel like we should try to push back and get funding from the county. What they told us, it's their road, it's their thing, and I know that they handed it off to us as soon as it was finished, but I think until we get a confirmation that nobody is going to help pay for this, I don't want to push it till that
I just don't know how long
happens.
it's going to take. Are we be sitting here for 3 months, 6 months,
It
and then
would
we're
be
getting more
talk to
complaints?
Gina, right? She's been pushing it, so we'd have to just see how far she has gotten. I don't think we should throw our hands in the air and say, go spend the $14,000 right
Get an
yet.
update from Gina and see where she's
Yeah,
at
I'd want
with
to see
that.
update then.
Yeah,
It does seem odd that the county just kind of
wash their hands.
Yeah. And they did the one, but didn't do ours, and they're throwing that whole speed limit thing in.
And then they don't, the whole bike thing, I can't remember exactly, but if we can put a bike path in or a sign in, because somebody's got to say in it, somebody's got to, why are they not giving us money for the crossing? If we can't put some sign up, because it's, I don't know what the rule was or what it was, but I do feel like maybe check with Gina on this one, just to see, have we exhausted all our options?
Sounds good. So, Chief, can we,
Would you like to check with Gina, or would you like me to? I guess just give me some direction.
could you please check with Gina to see where we're at when it comes to the county on covering that cost?
And
of
so with
everything?
that being said, I guess, just so I'm providing her or giving her the direction from the committee, the number one want would be to have the push button flash when
Yes.
there is a pedestrian, and to try to push that forward versus
Yes.
some of these
Yep.
other options.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm not pushing the
I
wrong
would like to
thing.
have what they put at the end of
Okay.
the trail right at Cratley.
Great.
Anybody who drives a car knows that the speed limit changes from 35 to 45. You're not going, you need a crosswalk. You need something that says people are coming. And I think that they should be liable for part of that, their little trail they put in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So good on that one? Do we have to,
Discussion only.
I don't think there's a motion because you're basically pushing it back to myself and
okay.
Gina to
Yeah, I mean-
get more date detail.
Did you guys, I mean, have we exhausted all options in your opinion? I know you said you've gone back and she has asked, but have we really pushed back and
Into
tried?
that, yeah, because I've asked Gina to help out with it, I don't know that answer.
Okay.
I mean, I know that she's reached out and she's provided Public Works Chair with some information, and at the time it was Mary, she provided Mary with some information, so I think just kind of circling back, it's another month, but, we can continue. I can't remember how long Matt said it would be from the time of order to actually receiving it, but, I mean, if we can get it in by the end of summer, hopefully, that would be
Yeah, it's summer now.
So-
If the weather cooperates,
Yeah.
summer will be here. Can we do a motion about, we would like to move forward on this if we can confirm that all avenues have been exhausted, that it goes straight to the board, the trustees? Is that legal?
So-
That's up to you all.
so you're saying that if we find out from Gina
So
that
Gi-
we can't do anything else, that we just want to push it forward to doing our side of everything?
Yes.
I agree.
So I would like to make a motion that if we can confirm that all avenues have been exhausted to try to get funding to put this sign in or paid for, we can move it straight to the trustee board meeting, the next meeting.
The next meeting, yeah.
I'll second that.
Perfect. Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 So, sweet, done. It definitely needs to be there.
Yes. Number 10, police department staffing and coverage.
So just one update on that. Our newest officer, for family purposes, has resigned as effective Monday, June 9th. And so I am working through the process of filling that vacancy. The police commission at the time that that we had that officer as an option had pushed forward an eligibility list. There were 3 people that were pushed forward on that eligibility list. I have 1 person that I'm still entertaining as an option. Met with that person this morning, had him fill out some paperwork related to a release of information so I can speak with certain entities in a background investigation. And so I will start that process. I will let you know that that person is not currently certified because the police commission did open it up to anybody that wanted to be an officer but wasn't certified because we were looking for a bigger pool. And so if that candidate were to move forward and we were to hire that candidate, the next academy starts in, I believe, November. I'm going to clarify that tomorrow. So that means that they would be in the academy from November through probably March. And that we wouldn't actually get them into the field training program here until that time, which would mean that they would not be on their own, because our field training program is 4 to 4.5 months, until later than this time next year. The other option, if we don't move forward with that candidate, is to start a new process. That usually takes about 2.5 months to get to the point where we have a list of people to choose from. If they're not certified, then we would still use that November academy date. If they were certified, then it would be a matter of 4.5 months from then. So if you think 2 months from now, we're really looking at June to July, and then August, maybe, or first part of September. And then we'd have them on their own, hopefully by January or February of 2026. So when we go short-staffed and we don't have a lot of options, and I guess just for facts, the Eau Claire Academy right now has 20 recruits. 19 of them have already been hired by agencies, so they're sponsored through by agencies. The the Rice Lake Academy currently, which just started, both of them just started last week, so they've got the full academy ahead of them, has 7 candidates that are not currently not currently employed, but 4 of them are currently in interviews and processes to get hired by agencies. So there's not a great pool of, let me rephrase. We've not seen a great pool of people that are currently certified as law enforcement officers in the state of Wisconsin that are applying around the community. This last process to get to this to this eligibility list, it took us 3 different times, 3 different processes. So the candidate pool is slim, and those that are looking, they're finding agencies and getting hired and going through the process of being sponsored through the academy, which we're open to doing. There's a major reimbursement for all of the costs from the state, which is, I think, why a lot of the agencies are now kind of moving back toward that. That was heavy when I first started. It went away for quite some time, and now we're back to that process of people being sponsored. So that's just the update on our current staffing. So we won't be at full staff for several months, if not longer than possibly a year. So working with the officers, obviously, to make sure that they still get their time off and all the training that we previously had set up for them and whatnot. I met with Gina this week, and she's very supportive of if there's something that we need to look at to try to make sure that our officer wellness is high and they're not getting burned out by things. We'll take a look at that. And so if there is something that we identify between she and I, will bring it to either to this committee or to the full board, the personnel committee, and have some recommendations. But at this time, unfortunately, this is not our first go around on these being short-staffed. So,
Do you feel the staff will be able to handle everything for a year if we go through the candidate side of everything?
we don't have a choice. I mean, there's not like a
I know,
part-time option, but I mean, we do have resources as far as, if we do need assistance from Hudson PD or assistance from St. Croix County, those are options. It just kind of depends on what kind of cases we're working on. I mean, if we get deep into a major case, it might be something where we're going to have to hand off a case or at least part of a case. But I think the citizens should know that we're going to keep the same, as best we can, the same level of service that we've provided over the years.
Yeah, because I guess if you went to option A, we're looking at March, probably having somebody. Otherwise, option B would be like January. It's like, what's another 3 months? If you feel that the candidate program is probably a better option, then maybe we should go that route.
What happens if they fail the program?
Then we start over.
So we got that on.
I mean, that's
always
thing.
it's always a question,
It's a
which is why
risk
we
that you
work really
take.
hard on the front end to make sure we try to get the right candidates on that eligibility list. This was an unforeseen set of circumstances from my perspective, but we have had officers that just don't make the cut, and we don't want to put the wrong people on the street
Agreed.
either, just to have a body in a uniform, and we've worked really hard to avoid that.
Yeah, no, a really good job, and it's unfortunate that we're in this position so soon.
I mean, obviously, we want to listen to your recommendations as well in this situation. What do you feel is best for your staff and everything? So, is there? I know that we've had a lot of turnover every once in a while. Seems like every 4 or 5 years or anything like that. Is there any reasonings why? Like, are people just getting bored of being a cop in a village, or?
It's a great question, and I can honestly tell you that every time I've had an officer come to me and say that they were resigning or moving to a different position, it's always been, it's not the department, it's not any of the people, I need to make a change. And so in the last several that we've had, many of them have gone to the public sector and said law enforcement wasn't what I expected it to be, and I just, I need different times with my family. I didn't realize that shift work was the way that it might be. And a lot of those were new to law enforcement. We had an officer that left after 3.5 years to go to another agency to be closer to a family member. So that's where most of our historical, when we've captured people from the east side of the state, it's they'll give us 3 to 5 years and then they go back to closer to home because now they've got some experience. But like I was just saying, so I just did some research. I've trained 18 officers in my time here, and we've had really good luck with keeping them, 3 to 5 years in that range. We've had some that were 7.5 to 8 years, but we don't have a lot of room for
Growth.
moving up a ladder. We don't have a K-9 program. We don't have a lot of we can't become a supervisor. So we've tried to do some more kind of low level assigning to some special needs or training, the DARE program, doing the firearms instructor, doing the DAD instructor, just to give them a little extra work. And kind of the only issue is, or I guess the only thought pattern is, there's no additional pay for that. It's just we're giving them more busy work or more work that maybe gives them some value, which I appreciate completely. But I was talking to Gene about that too, is, but we don't have, if the sergeant's been here 5 years, I've been here 19 years as chief, there's not a lot of room to go, hey, I want to be
Right.
sergeant someday.
Right.
I mean, that could be your whole career before you end up being that. But our current staffing is all 3 of the officers that I have are 5 years or 5 years plus.
Nice.
And at least, not that they've ever mentioned to me, they're not looking to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where the longer that they stick with not having full staff, does that change something? All of them worked with us during the time when we only had 4, that we only were budgeted for 4. And then when Hudson EMS was disbanded, there was still money in the public safety budget, and so that's when we added an officer. So in my career, when I was on patrol, we had 6 officers. When I got promoted, we went to 5. At some point, I think it was 2013, the budget wouldn't support and they needed a big dollar amount, and so they pulled an officer, which brought us to 4. We were that way until 2000, I believe 19 is when we went back to 5. And so we're currently budgeted for 5, including myself, and so that's where we've sat. So it's, it is that ebb and flow. It's a smaller agency, not a lot of, we have certain shifts. We need to cover a certain amount of time, not a lot of special assignments. So yeah, it's always been a struggle. And, the people that we bring in, we try to be as transparent as possible. As a matter of fact, before they do their backgrounds, there's a sheet that says the realities of being a North Hudson police officer. And I think a page and a half of just things that are not super positive,
Right.
but just to let
Realistic.
you know, you're not going to get patted on the back every day by citizens. That's just something that doesn't get done. It should, but it doesn't. But realize that there are really real positive things that are going on. So
It takes the right person to do that shift work, and it changes, and it takes a huge toll on your family. It does. I get it. I did it.
Absolutely.
So
Right.
it does take the right person that steps in to do it. So.
and the right support system. And we
Correct.
work really hard on trying to make sure that people have, not only from us, but, families that understand. And we work with families when we can to explain, if you see your officer acting this way, they may have been through a bad call. And when you go through a child abuse case and maybe a death investigation all in one shift, and you go home and your significant other, when you walk in the door, says, "Honey, how was your day?" You don't puke all of that negativity onto them. You say, "It was good. Yeah, it's fine." Even though you're still sitting in a lot of this.
Oh yeah, it
So
doesn't go away.
yeah.
it's tough to sometimes explain that to family members until they see it. And unfortunately, it's usually when that closet full of stuff blows open because they can't handle any more inside of it. So huge push for wellness in law enforcement right now, and we've included that annually they have to do a wellness visit. We have the EAP program available to them, and so it's not unlike, and I was just talking to my previous chief, Brian Eichel, the other day, it's not like when we started where it was, suck it up, put dirt on it, move on to the next call.
Yeah.
We're actually concerned, or at least, trying to get them some resources to be able to help. So with all that being said, we're short-staffed, and we'll do our best.
Okay. I guess just let us know what your recommendations are.
Will do.
11, Police Department Capital Equipment Planning, discussion only.
Nothing new to report on that. Still looking at the replacement of the rifles, and then just trying to put together. It sounds like the court might be finally out of there after July. There's one case that's being held open that will get pushed to the Somerset court, but still utilizing that office space, and then I'll come forward with some recommendations for transitioning of that space to more of that soft kind of in intermediary room that we can utilize for a couple of different things. So
Perfect.
I'll get that information for you.
Sweet. Anybody have any future agenda items they want to be brought?
Nope.
I don't have anything.
Just out of curiosity, leaving number 7 on for next month.
Yeah, let's put that back on there again
Okay.
until we can finally.
And then number 9, from what I understand, that motion, if there are if everything has been exhausted, that will not come back to this committee.
Correct, it's go straight to the board.
Straight to the
Yep.
board.
So then that means that at 6:41 we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.